This is Waitara Te Tangata. We welcome you here with the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, no mai, ka puti tonu ana, to the members of Cabinet, to members of Parliament. We ask you to look upon these lands, to look upon these people and see Waitara for what Waitara truly is. To the newly elected and re-elected members of Council, Neil Holdham, he spoke inside the House, kei hea koe Neil, e ka puti tonu ana. We acknowledge you in being a part of bringing Te Pūtake o Te Riri to here, to Waitara. And I would also like to reference the trustees of Alway Marae and acknowledge them because of the amount of work it took to make this day happen. To your chair, Rawiri Toba, Hanataua Tito, Pereni Tupe, Mapaturia White, Tiri Bailey, Patsy Bodger, Huani Eriwata, Selwyn Lanaka Priest, Patsy Porter, Henry Wenza, and Anaru White. E mihi ana ki a koutou, I tautoko mai I tēnei rangi. The other thing to acknowledge today is the presence of the Defence Forces who are supporting this by cooking our kai. It feels strange to see Defence Forces in this role, given the role of armed forces in 1860. In 1860, the armed forces were the very sharp, thin edge of the wedge that moved to separate us as people. And now we have the Defence Forces working to bring us together on this day. E mihi ana. Kua huri te ao. The first commemoration held at Waitangi Te Tii Marae, and with the last day held at Kororareka on the 11th of March last year, coincided with the 173 years anniversary of the sacking of Kororareka. It was one of the earliest and most significant battles here in this country. The visits we had to Puketutu, to Ki Ohaiwai, to Ruapeka, held by Kawiti, were made significant by the fact that local people told local stories. How important it is knowing that many people have heard about Ruapeka, maybe with Te Kawiti would not have heard about Hone Heke, Patuone, Taumati Wakanene. Those names have been heard, but how many people have known the stories and the history behind them? And so I acknowledge Hirini Henare and Waihoroi Shortland, who made those stories come real, to become real among the people who attended on that day. Just as the language, the landscape comes alive with images, we acknowledge the work of Radio New Zealand, Mihi Ngarangi Forbes, who put together the documentary about Ruapeka. And we look to the work again of Mihi Ngarangi and Mahanga Pihama, and we hope that you are all pleased with the work that they have been able to achieve this year in Waitara. The conflict that occurred in North Taranaki follows a chronological sequence of what happened in Te Taitokero. So it is natural that we turn our attention to Taranaki, just as it is natural for us to turn our attention to Waikato, to Tainui, where the battles were fought when the troops crossed the Mangatawhiri stream. E mihi ana. In Pātea, ngā rauru, Ngāti Ruanui recognise Waitara within their waiata, the Waiatai sung. Within the poi that we sing, we continue to recognise Waitara. I te rā o mai he, kairi kei te torona, koe anei, ko te torona, o te karauna, I eke ki runga I te torona, o te paipera. The throne of the Crown of England was put above the throne that is referenced within the Bible. And the waiata was adapted and adopted by Te Kōti Arikirangi Pūtake. In Pariaka, every month for the last 157 years, on the 18th and 19th, we recognise Tohu e Te Whiti on the 18th and 19th because that is a reference to the 17th of March. Pariaka continues to hold to the view that we recognise the days to keep that day tapu. For us in Taranaki, all roads lead to Pūtake o Te Riri, the roads lead here today. To begin with, we considered including all of Taranaki in this. All of Taranaki included South Taranaki in the wars that were fought by Titoko Waru. All of Taranaki also included the stand of Tohu e Te Whiti using non-violent resistance against the Crown. But we quickly realised that this hopscotch of 150 kilometres from here in Waitara down to Te Utu o Te Manu, then on to Aotearoa, and then on to Taiporo Henui was too great a challenge for even us to comprehend how we would be able to share an accurate portrayal of our history. So it is fitting that we come here and focus on Waitara. The first Taranaki War began, as has been said already, on the 17th of March in 1860. A year later it concluded, and Governor Grey was on the verge of acknowledging that the forced purchase of Waitara, of Peka Peka, the 600 acres, was wrong and was going to hand the land back. However, just prior to that, the Crown found it in its heart perhaps to force Taranaki off disputed lands of Totoraimaka. With the forcing off of the people that were on Totoraimaka, that the war had begun again. And so in 1863, the war began with an ambush in Ruakere as a challenge to the Crown to leave Totoraimaka and not occupy that land. For the next 6 years, Taranaki fought wars. Until 1866. So from 1860 to 1866, 3 years. That included the attacks on many communities throughout Taranaki. Now we know, and we hold the view very strongly in Taranaki, that the Crown always planned to confiscate our lands. While there isn't a lot of evidence of that, we are able to say that in 1863, the New Zealand Loans Act was passed, and it was used as the finance to wage war against Māori, to put settlers onto the land that was taken, and to do other public works. The collateral they used for that loan of £3 million was the lands of Taranaki and the lands of Waikato. We also know that the same year that they passed that, in 1863, when the attacks occurred in Ruakere, when they occupied Totoraimaka, and when they crossed the Mangatawhiri, we know that they passed the law, the New Zealand Settlements Act, that put into place that anyone that the Crown deemed as being a rebel, their lands would be confiscated. Within Taranaki, we have the evidence we have that they were talking about this is a statement that was made in 1858 in a letter that was sent to the magistrates of this country. It said, should anything happen, what the magistrates have to do to place the government technically in the right is to bring the rebelliousness of the natives up to a point of actual defiance of the Crown, and therefore be high treason. So in 1858, with these statements that were made, the plans were already in place to create the conflict that we saw here in Waitara. Now, if we focus on Waitara, it is very easy to think the Pūtake o te Riri is defined by the concept of cannon fire, of muskets and swords. But in actual fact, our tupuna fought in many different ways. Our tupuna fought with peace. Our tupuna fought by standing and maintaining occupation of their lands in spite of the pressure that was placed on them. We know that those many different ways and forms of fighting against and resisting against the confiscation of lands were largely ignored. I'm looking for Kelvin Davis's comments that he made in Wangaro aku kore. He pēnei te kōrero makue, he whakarapo poto o kōrero Kelvin. At the passing of the Act of the Pariaka Reconciliation Bill into law, Kelvin Davis made the point along these lines, that the brutality and the injustice that occurred in these lands should not be recognized by war. We should not be defined by war. War should not be the basis that we remember Waitara. Waitara should be remembered of what Te Rangitake and the people of Waitara, the people of Te Aotearoa, wanted for this place. They saw Waitara as a critical part of the economic and social development, the fabric of Taranaki.
Te Korimako o Taranaki.
In 1867, this was the township of Raleigh, named after Sir Walter Raleigh, who made tobacco smoking fashionable and went in search into the South America seeking El Dorado, the city of gold, and committed such offences that he was executed by his own government. That was the name that was wanted to be put upon this beautiful township, this beautiful land, this beautiful place. Just as well, when the borough was established, that Waitara in 1904, so I say, Raleigh should be buried down deep in the ground, and we should recognise what Waitara should have been if Te Rangitake and the people of Te Aotearoa had faced the rangatiratanga that was accorded to them by te whakaputanga o te rangatiratanga o New Tireni o tira i roto i te tiriti o Waitangi. A mere 25 years before, the crowd recognised the rangatiratanga of Māori in this land with the Declaration of Independence. and then went into partnership with the Tiriti o Waitangi and guaranteed full and exclusive right to maintain our lands, forests and fisheries, and then in one generation came here to Waitara to pull down that rangatiratanga. So I look upon this and I say, let's put aside that Waitara that we did not want. Waitara did not want war. It did everything it could to not allow war to take place on this land. Whakaarangia tēnei a Waitara ki te apōpō I kōrero I roto I te whare. I te mea ko te apōpō ka rereke, e tautoko anau I te kōrero a Jacinda. Our Premier said in the House that by the 200-year anniversary of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, what will our relationships be like? The relationships of Waitara should be based on a relationship based on trust, and Māori and Pākehā being here working together, and Waitara should be acknowledged as the cultural capital of North Taranaki. While I'm here, I'm looking, hey here hoki, hey te kaputi I tonu. Zach, wait, e mai o mai ana, e mai o ana ki a kōrua. That with 13,000 signatories, it was like a lush piece of ground flourishing in the middle of a desert. And when you find an oasis, you're looking for a spring, a stream, or a pool that has driven their growth. When we saw Otorohanga stand up on that day in 2015 and deliver that message, what we found was a huge subterranean reservoir that would sustain generations to come, and that is a reservoir of youth. The weapons you used were not muskets and swords, were not taiaha, they were your voices, and nothing is more powerful. You used your voices to break through the mortar and the brick that had for so long sealed that part of our history in full neglect. And so, koe rā no, I tuku atu te pānui, they laid the challenge upon this land today. I stand with you and say, this is that day. Waitara is this day. This is not a coincidence that we are on te whakapūtanga o te rangatiratanga o New Tirini. It is not a coincidence that this is the day of the Declaration of Independence. So, what is te Pūtake o te Riri? What was the foundation of the conflict that occurred in this country? It was a failure by the tanga o Māori te mana motuhake I ruaki a koutou. E mihi ana ki ngā iwi o te taitokerau I Waitangi. That this day in Waitangi, taitokerau meets on this day to commence. We know that they were concerned that if we use this day, the Declaration of Independence, substance of the Declaration of Independence, we do not want to bury the Declaration of Independence. We want to. The recognition of rangatiratanga is a part of a right of Māori within this country, and it is recognised on this day. Ka piri nei te Pūtake o te Riri ki tēnei rangi. As I think and I look where we are today, it is very easy to say, Waitara, what do we see of Waitara? The former home of Borthwick's Freezing Works, the home of sporting legends of a great number, the place where we had sin fuels, wellheads. Is that the Waitara? I say Waitara is here on Owai Marae as we see it. All around us are the symbols that our tupuna left us to recognise what Waitara stood for. We only have to look at the oldest building on this park, Waitara Nui o Ngarue, the building that was named after Wharematangi chasing the dart of his father Ngarue from Kawhia to arrive here and gave that name to this location. Waitara. One day maybe we'll have an H after the W. But at this point, Waitara Nui a Ngarue talks about the legacy of our tupuna who stood for centuries upon this land. And that is that house, built in 1886. Further to Manu Korihi Marae, Ara, ko te wharekai, kua huna I te tēnetira, behind building the wharekai, named Manu Korihi for the hapu here, and it has above its name 1860. Not because the house was built in 1860, but because Manu Korihi wanted the people of this area never to forget what happened in 1860. We only need to look a little bit further and we see Tamawahine, our wharekai. Our wharekai built in 1921. Tamawahine recognizes the role of our wahine in upholding the legacy of Maunga Rongo I runga I te whenua. Many people focus on our men who were taken prisoner down south, and that did happen. But what of the women who maintained Pariaka for all those years under starvation, having their everything of value taken from them, and every day the troops marching through the community presenting arms? No more than 25 people were allowed to meet in one place. A perimeter was placed around the community and you needed a permit to enter the community. Our wahine maintained the kaupapa and the legacy of the Maunga Rongo I roto Pariaka. It is fitting that Tamawahine takes pride and place on this marae. It is fitting also we have Tamatane that was business. It is fitting that we recognize that it was built also to record the Sim Commission in 1927 that found that the acts of the Crown were illegal. And so with that, many of the men within Taranaki then decided to go and fight in the war, prior to participate in the war of the Crown. And so the whare Tamatane acknowledges the men who were taken prisoner and the men who fought here in this country and overseas. The house was also used to house the carvers who built this wonderful wharenui here. I can say it's wonderful because nā Ngāti Porau I tuku mai. A pira ngata nānei tuku mai, hone taiapa, pine taiapa tērā reanga. Those master carvers from the East Coast came to carve a house and to acknowledge Maui Pomare and his legacy. The government built the statue of Maui Pomare that came from the corona. And Maui Pomare's ashes sit below that. He passed away in 1930. He passed away overseas, and it took 6 years to prepare the ground so that Taranaki could get over the fact that he had passed away. They thought that he had gone to America to negotiate with the American government. Little did they know he was traveling to America to seek a remedy for tuberculosis he acquired while going and supporting the hospitals and the dormitories where the isolation wards of those who are suffering from a Maui Pomare kotona whare te karoa a Maui. We only need also to look at the Pami. In actual fact, those are tennis courts and netball courts. After the findings of the Sim Commission, the Taranaki and funded X-ray machines so that we could address the and they started sport as the main activity to engage youth in positive netball courts and the tennis courts behind us, and we know Maui Pomare was a gun at tennis. And so those were the courts that were used on Maui Pomare Day. And the grounds just over there were used for hockey. Hockey was the game of that time. Many of the men were overseas in war. And so, ngā wahine, ngā tāne, tākoro hockey, and in Ruatoria at Wakarua Park. This way that recognises all of the iwi that connect here to Waitara. We recognise the tree, the miro tree, that is just behind, that was planted by Tuheitia when he brought the mate of Ea Tairangi Kāhu to this marae o Maui Pōmaretai. E mihi kau ana ki a koutou tainuima. E ora tonu ana te miro. E ora tonu ana te miro. E manu anō te rā ka kai te rā rākau. Tēnei anō te manu e kai ana hi e nei kōrero. To conclude this circumference of Owai Marae, I look towards the tree that is next to Ngarue, Whaitara Nui a Ngarue. That tree was planted by Pōhau Ellison, the fourth Māori doctor to be qualified and practice. The first Maui Pōmare and the second Te Rangi Hiroa. Is it not fitting that the Pūtake o Te Riri here in Taranaki, where we suffered the huge impact of confiscations and all that went with it, were able to produce doctors to find solutions and way forward to find well-being in this time. So I celebrate the tree that stands there as a symbol that Taranaki is still seeking the well-being that was spoken about by Te Rangitake in his time. Ka wai hoki reira, he poto te wā, he nui te kōrero. There are many others that wish to speak, and much has been said, and much will continue to be said. We stand together with the words, Kelvin, with te tāhu o te mātauranga. We need to make this history real. How do we make it real? We live this, we talk this. We talk it over a kitchen table, we talk it on the streets. We say never forget Waitara, never forget what happened, because it shouldn't have happened, and what should have happened is what is the conversation that we are having today. Te Pūtake o Te Riri, kei konei e aro ana ki te Pūtake o te Maungarongo. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Tēnei waiata, he waiata popoto nei, engari anō he waiata ki runga i o tātou mate, ko te rā i roto i a tātou. He hate take i hara mai ai, he whakaaro nui ki a rātou. Ai runga i a Taranaki, ngā puna wai i mātau. Ai roto i a Pūkamo, ngā puna wai i wera e. Ko te iringa niu, ko paua kai i tonu. Ko Taranaki maunga, arai i tonga e. E pupuhi ana te tonga. Te haumakariri o te tonga. Engari anō ko tātou maunga, e arai ana ki te he o te wā. Anei e mihi ana ki a koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kairi te mātou ki ngā manu o te moana. No o ana i runga i te kō atu. Ka pari te tai. Ka ngā rumia taua kō atu i te moana. Ka rere ngā manu no te mea ka hore e no o ngā morātau. Least we resemble the seabirds perched on a rock. When the tide flows, the rock is covered by the sea. And the birds take flight, for they have no resting place. Nā, wiremu, a kingi te rangitake tērā kōrero. Ko tēnei wā, ko tai mai, ko ngā manu ki te kō atu. Ko tēnei wā, ko tai mai, mātou nei ki roto i o Waitara. Anā, ki te rapu ki tēnei, ko te kōrero. I tika ana e mauana ko te whenua no reira i runga i tērā, e Ruakere. I tika ana ka mihi atu ki a koe. Nā wano tēnei, nā wano e whakarite ai ko tēnei kaupapa ma mātou nei o tiatia o Taranaki no reira i runga i tērā. E te rangatira tēnei timi i tēnā koe, tēnā koe, tēnā koe. Now, whānau, I'd like to introduce our second speaker. Our second speaker is the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, the Minister of Māori Development. With her kōrero o te Pūtake o Te Riri, me o nā kaupapa, anō reira i runga i tērā, te kuia nei, te manu kōrero nei, e kōrero nei ki a mātau i tēnei ahi ora mai, whakatau mai.
Kia ora.
Te rere o taku mani ki tēnei wāhi, mani kōrehi, te atia wa Taranaki iwi tēnei ki ia tuki a kaupatatua. Ngā kaitarati o te marae nei, e kahana ki te hāpai ki te tautoko tēnei o ngā kaupapa tātou e kuihui mai nei e te mininga tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Tēnei te mihi anō ki ngā pai rangatira i whakaraupapa hia i ngā kōrero hei tuāpapa mō ngā rangi e tua, ngā rangi e toru kei mo i te aroaro. Ko te wāhi kōrero mākio kia ngā whakamua. Nō reire i roto i tērā, ka tuitui ngā hia o a tātou nei rangatahi, a tātou nei mā tātahi. Firstly, I want to acknowledge everyone who's been involved of conversations. To the marae trustees, ngā kai hāpai i tēnei kaupapa, to the organising committee, we're being asked today to have a conversation. And it goes something like this, and I perhaps should take the Prime Minister's lead. In 2040, when we are thinking about 21 years of conversation, do we want our country to have? What kind of place, kind of things might we do to contribute to that vision? Just this morning you witnessed a whole lot of things, and I could probably comment on so many of the things that happened, but as the government delegation came onto the marae and it was raining, and we waited for the first call to go out, and we waited, and you saw the multitudes lining up in front of the wharenui, and the rain kept coming down. And then the kaiwero came out and they placed raukura on a stake in the ground in front of the Prime Minister, and that was picked up. And immediately one might have thought, what is the symbolism of that? Without knowing anything, without knowing too much. What kind of challenge was being placed in front of the government? And you saw what happened. The challenge was picked up and the Prime Minister brought it down. A great magnitude of passion, history, belief, teachings of many tribes who had come to support what was here today, but then still reflecting what was the nature of the challenge that the Prime Minister was being asked to pick up. Was it about hate, or was it about love? Was it about the past, or was it about the future? Was it about the things that give us hope and confidence to be a brave and resilient young nation to move forward? Or was it going to be the kinds of things that keep our doors closed and stop speaking to one another about some hurtful things? Or was it about all of that? Then you would have heard all the kōrero in the marae. But I come back to this one question. If the question today that we are being asked to respond to, and that is, what kind of nation do we want to be in 2040, and for all the reasons that those raukura on that stake was placed on the ground in front of the Prime Minister, that she picked up and took us forward into that conversation with a level of belief that we need to have a necessary conversation about that future. Because it is no coincidence that at this time, Tuia 250 is currently being commemorated around the country. Cook's arrival, and the hurtful things that happened, but also the things that we need to learn and move on from. Then the 28th of October and this day, and what it meant for so many iwi around the country when they signed the declaration. It was the only document that my tupuna signed. But if the manifest destiny of this nation is about going back to first principles and being the nation that we believe we can be, if the manifest destiny is that, then the declaration, I think, is a good place to start and acknowledge the point that you made, Ruakere, that is no coincidence. Very deliberate. Very deliberate. Because if we go back to the first principles conversation about what kind of country do we want to be, and where must we start, and we use he putanga, the declaration as that starting place, our first principal aspiration as a nation is that we respect one another and we uphold those things that define who we are, our whenua, our people, our taiao, our beliefs. And then we work out from there what are the things that can bind and create a sense of common purpose and unity. For all those things, I believe that that was the right intent of how we continued this conversation. The other thing that I wanted to acknowledge was the future. I mean, those young people went to Orako in 2014, Praone koutou mai, and you told the stories of Orako and Rangi Awhia, and they wondered, why didn't we hear these things in school? Why is it that we have to go and listen out there and hear these things as if it was only for the first time? What more can we do? And when they collected those signatures on the petition, standing at the shopping malls, in the streets, going to hui, and all of that, and having those cup of tea conversations with people, why are you doing this? What does it mean to you? And they had to respond as young people about what it meant to them, and brought that petition to Parliament, and then sat in front of the Select Committee and started to answer all the questions that those members of Parliament had for them, which is, what is this all about? Is this just about a national holiday? No. It's about ensuring that every child coming through the New Zealand education system have the ability to learn about their local history. We should applaud them on behalf of our mokopuna and our mokopuna's mokopuna, because you should be able to learn those types of things within the school system, and that is now happening, and I'm pleased that they were there to witness the Prime Minister's statement about that in Parliament. But it also goes something like this. When those girls spoke in front of the Select Committee, and I recall, I'm not sure if you're here, Jonathan, but I recall one of the questions that was asked, and I'm sure you pitched the kōrero to them. What would you hope to achieve if we got this right? What would you hope to achieve, JC, if you got this right? Those girls looked a steely blue down the line of the Select Committee and said, hope. Hope. That the generation of New Zealanders who follow us know their history and are strong enough to know this is who we are. This is who we are, but we're building a great nation. So in acknowledging the vision of our rangatahi and the purpose as to why we're having these types of conversations, come back to the principal question: what kind of country do we hope to be in 2040? Because we're turning this it's a big turn of the waka into this destiny that we're going into. And we as government, like you, stand very exposed to the fragility of how New Zealanders think. Some New Zealanders think and don't want to have this conversation, but we need to. And feel uncomfortable about hearing things, but we need to. Because we don't want to have our kids say to us, oh, Mum, why didn't you tell us all of this? And their mum says, because I thought I was protecting you. But in protecting people by not letting them know what was happening, was that any better? And I've heard too many of my grandparents' time who have heard stories like that, and I don't want that for my young child. So we have a moment in time to think about 21 years going forward, and the comment was made in the House, this is like the long game. This is not looking for the short one, this is a long game. We've got to be relentlessly committed to having the necessary conversation as if our future depended on it, like 1,000 cups of teas over a long period of time. And I want to acknowledge you all for being in the room to start having these conversations, because you've got open minds. We need open hearts. With open minds and open hearts, we can have the hardest conversations and still be able to sit across the table, hopefully have a cup of tea, and say, okay, where do we go to from here? Because that's what's necessary. Te Pūtake o Te Riri, when it was started by my predecessor, Te Riro Flavel, and I acknowledge him for picking up the challenge during his time, was an opportunity to, at the very least, enable iwi to think about shaping what these series of events could lead to and the types of conversations. A committee was formed, and the committee in itself determined its own destiny for these series of conversations. First one at Rua Pika Pika, which was referred to, the second one here. The next lot of conversations that follow on from here help us to discover our appetite as a nation as to whether it is a day or not, maybe, but more importantly, ensuring that people have an opportunity to wānanga like this. Over the next 3 days, there is a brilliant array of sharing wānanga, conversations, storytelling to contribute to understanding the history of very specific history in very specific locations. So let's take that and let's make it useful. Let's draw on it for inspiration for, again, the next 21 years and beyond. Lastly, I'll come to this small point, but it's a significant one. Tērā pia ka tīpako I ngā whiako o a takatūpuna. Ko te tangata e mōhio te kakara o te pakanga, e matua mōhio te taonga o te rongo mai, te maungārongo. And I'm saying the person who understands the devastation and huge challenge if we go to war, what that really means, will absolutely understand the importance of maintaining peace. Many of our ancestors who fought during the wars in the 1860s and the stories that were left behind by them tell of great feats of hurt and loss, passion, freedom fighters, but also of the strength and belief in the resilience of their people, for the land, for the next generation, for holding on to all the things that have been passed on to them and were God-given, so that they could continue to be the vestige of hope and determination for the survival of their people, and that's what we want for New Zealand. And when we all can say that and look each other in the eye and believe it with a sense of passion, that actually there's a lot happening in the world. And if the world looks to us for direction, let it be because of our aspiration to be a country that will move through all these challenges and then be able to reconcile our future in a different way for a better purpose. And that's why I believe he passed on to his son the great hope in the well-known saying, there's but one eye of the needle through which the red, the white and the black thread must pass. After me, hold on to the ture, faith and aroha, no matter what. Because those are the things that will define us. Let us have open minds and open hearts and a spirit of reciprocity between our peoples to know that the next 21 years of a necessary conversation could be hard, but it's a necessary one. Nō reira I te nākau whakaiti, me te whakapono, a ki tēnei o ngā kaupapa ka tino mihira o a tirake a koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tata katoa, kia ora.
pai, o tēnā koe, Nanaia, kōrero mai nei, ko ngā kōrero kia mātau i tēnei rā. Te hoki nei ki ngā, o tētai o ngā wakatau ki a tāweo, ko tai te kākao ka wati, kia ka puia e kore e wati. So one of our toi branches easily break, but when you join them all together, they stay strong. So mihi atu kia koe e kawe tēnei ko te kōrero o ngā mātua tūpuna, me te atu te tiro nei ki ngā rā kaikaro mai. No reira i runga i tērā te whānau, kai konei ko te kai kōrero o nai nei, whai ake nei, ko Kelvin Day. O taiwa, ko kai tatata nei ka tai atu ki tērā atu Kelvin. So ko ia ko te kai kōrero wakamutinga. But Kelvin Day has been the previous Pukeariki curator and rangatira there, and historian, and I know that he has will have a wonderful kōrero, a champion of New Zealand Wars. So Kelvin, kai a koe te kōrero.
Tia ka roa a Maui, te whare i tūrā, tēnā koe. O Waimarai i takato nei, tēnā koe. Tēnei te mihi ki te hau kāinga. Tēnei koutou i pōwhiri mai nei. Me te karanga o te kaupapa. I karangatia ai i a tātou. I raurangatira mā. Tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou i te ahutanga o te wā. I takehia, i te huarahi, i kukuia mai ai. I taki, nau reira, e raurangatira mā, koutou mā, katoa, tō mātau nuinga. Tēnei te mihinui, te miti, tēnei te mihitu ake, ke raro i te whakaruruhau o te whare i tūnei. Me te marae e horarā, kia koutou katoa i noho nei. Nau reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko Taranaki te maunga, ko Waiwara nui te awa, ko Waria te tūranga waiwai, ko Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, ko Kelvin Day tōku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. In the early 1880s, my great-grandparents on one side of my family and my great-great-grandparents on the other took up land on the newly surveyed Waimandi Plains in South Taranaki, draining the extensive wetlands to form neat farms on what was part of 1.275 million acres of confiscated Taranaki land, only a small amount of which was returned to Maori. I have no idea how they felt about how the land was obtained. Growing up, I never heard my grandparents or my parents talk about the New Zealand wars. The only wars that were mentioned were World War I and World War II. Like most of their generation, I suspect they just did not know about them. My own introduction to the New Zealand wars was the discovery in my secondary school library of James Cowan's 2-volume The New Zealand Wars in the Pioneering Period. Reading the story of our history unfolded and set me on an ongoing journey of trying to understand the past. While we can say that the 1960, their origin extends back nearly 20 years before that. In fact, it could be argued that it was the musket wars of the 1820s which led to the wars. During the early 19th century, large numbers of Maori from Taranaki migrated to the lower North Island. Some did stay behind in order to maintain ahika. The New Zealand Company, of which the Plymouth Company was an offshoot, negotiated the Namutu deed in early 1840, resulting in the purchase of most of North Taranaki. In March 1841, the first of 6 Plymouth Company ships of settlers landed at Namutu. These immigrants arrived to start a new life, having been promised opportunities that would never have been available to them back in Devon and Cornwall. The first arrivals found a settlement that was still being surveyed and little in the way of accommodation. Had it not been for the assistance and hospitality of Ngāti Tawhiti, life for these settlers would have been much more challenging during the first few months. As further immigrants arrived, pressure began to build for more land. The purchases of the New Zealand Company were brought into question, resulting in an inquiry by William Spain in 1844, who found in favour of the company, pleasing the new settlers, but angering Maori. Governor Fitzroy subsequently overturned Spain's decision, ruling that land previously claimed by the company would have to be repurchased from its Maori owners. Included in this was the 3,500 acres within which the fledgling town of New Plymouth was situated. The settled demand for more land was continuous, and the Waitara lands were constantly attracting their gaze. They had convinced themselves that the area was underutilised and therefore ripe for settlement. There was, however, a problem. Maori were already using it, and in 1848, nearly 600, under the leadership of Wiremu Kingi Tarangatake, returned to their ancestral lands from the Waikanae region. They were to establish an extremely successful and profitable farming operation, growing crops and raising cattle largely centred on the Waitara area. They helped to keep New Plymouth in food and were shipping produce to Auckland. During the 1850s, some Maori indicated that they were prepared to sell, while others were strongly opposed to doing this. The so-called Puketapu feud of 1854-55, where one section of Puketapu wanted to sell land and another was strongly against it, played out in the Bell Block area. The skirmishes that took place between the factions were the catalyst for the settlers, fearing for their own safety, to successfully lobby for a formal military presence in New Plymouth in 1855. This was the sign of things to come. However, it was the proposed purchase of the 600-acre Peka block on the left bank of the Waitara River that was to prove to be the ignition point that brought full-scale war to Taranaki in 1860. By offering a block of land to Governor Gore Brown, Te Tera Manuka was challenging the authority of the paramount chief Wiremu Kingi Tarangatake. As a result of receiving poor advice from his officials, the governor proceeded with the purchase. In early 1860, surveyors moved on to the Peka block, where they were met with an unarmed party of Kingi supporters, mainly women, who among other things pulled up the survey pegs. Martial law was proclaimed, to which Kingi responded by constructing Te Kohia Pa on the southwestern corner of the block. This was attacked by British forces on the 17th of March, announcing the commencement of the Taranaki Wars. Naturally, losses and casualties were experienced on both sides. The military actively sought to destroy the Maori economic base. Kāinga, crops, flour mills, implements and cattle were all destroyed or stolen. Pākehā settlers had their homesteads burnt and their crops destroyed and cattle killed or taken. However, after the war, Pākehā could claim for their losses and receive compensation. No such opportunity existed for Maori. Following the 1881 invasion of Pūtake, I suggest non-Maori took the view that what started 21 years earlier in Waitara was now all done and dusted, and everyone could just get on with life. So began, I believe, a period of amnesia among the general Pākehā community, including my own ancestors, regarding these events. Clearly they felt the need, they didn't feel the need or desire to remember. There were, however, within the Pākehā population of Taranaki, isolated examples of remembrance which reveal the one-sided attitudes and understandings of the time, and I now briefly review them. After the invasion of Pūtake, the surveying of the Waimate Plains recommenced, and the site of Te Nutua Manu was surveyed off as an historic reserve. This was an important village of the great Ngāruahine leader Rifa Titakawaru, and the scene of a major defeat for the British in September 1868. A domain board was established, or Pākehā, and it was they who were charged with determining what would happen to the reserve. The initial thinking was that it should be treated as you would a cemetery. What did happen was the total transformation of this important site. The remnant rata, many of which had been used by Maori snipers, were felled and burnt. The rough ground, which contained the ditches, palisade lines and bunkers of the former defensive works, were ploughed, levelled and grassed. This was then followed by an extensive tree planting program, not with natives, but with exotics. A concrete monument was erected, listing the names of the Pākehā casualties. Reading through the names is like doing a roll call of the roads of the district. The unavoidable conclusion is that this was a deliberate controlling of how the narrative of Te Nutu Manu was to be told. The Maori history, which effectively was a victory, was to be replaced by a Pākehā one, and of course the Pākehā one was actually one of loss. Now that the reserve has been returned to Ngā Ruahine, new opportunities exist of how that narrative can be told. Continuing this theme, several historians have noted that many of the battle sites and fortifications associated with the New Zealand wars have been damaged or destroyed. It is not unusual to find a road has been placed through such sites, or agricultural activity has removed any evidence of them. That we allow this to happen is extremely telling. Why do we not value our past? I am sure in many instances such destruction has been quite deliberate, a way to try and remove an uncomfortable past, an ongoing demonstration of how much of our colonial history has been curated. I am firmly of the opinion that such places can play an extremely important part in our understanding of the past. For me, such kōrero belongs in the landscape, and those of you who will be visiting Tukohia, Puketakaore, Pukirangiora, Mahutahi tomorrow will, I'm sure, appreciate this. I do not think it is any coincidence that following a school visit to the sites of Ōrākau and Rangiawhia, that 4 Otorohanga College students, Waimarama Anderson, Rihana McGee, Tai Tiariki Jones and Leah Bell, and I acknowledge today the presence of Tai Jones and Leah Bell. It's fantastic having you here, well done. They were motivated by what they saw and heard for the first time. This prompted them to set up a petition which resulted in the government setting aside a day to annually remember the New Zealand wars. Many military cemeteries, which you would think were the most sacrosanct of places, have not always fared well. Within a matter of decades, these cemeteries had fallen into disrepair, the wooden headboards illegible or rotten, and often they were overgrown. Looking back, it seems unbelievable that this should happen, but perhaps not unexpected, given that many of those buried would not have had family in New Zealand to help maintain the graves. While some were reinterred in the early years of the 20th century, others still remain lonely and largely unknown. Where they are known, the graves are now maintained by the New Zealand government. Maori graves of those who fought in the wars also suffered. Thanks to the confiscation, many were no longer accessible to whānau, and over time their exact location has become less clear. Also, we do not have to look too hard to find examples where urupa have been quarried. There is even a case, not far from here, where a driveway has been placed over the graves of 6 Maori warriors. Such places deserve better. Decade reunions of battles were occasions when the wars were recalled, and they invariably focused on the deeds of the Pākehā veterans. These involved street parades, church services, formal dinners, and on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Waireka, veterans went out to the Plymouth Rifle Range for an afternoon of shooting. Noticeably, but not surprisingly, there was an absence of any Maori involvement. After all, why would they want to be part of these occasions given that they just served as a bitter reminder of the loss of ancestors, of lands, and the ability to be a strong player in the economy as they had once been. Probably the most bizarre but extremely telling of these commemorations occurred in November 1931, marking the 50th anniversary of the invasion of Parihaka. Organised by Richard Koch, former Mayor of New Plymouth and businessman, 40 people sat down to a dinner. In his address, he referred to the invasion of Parihaka as the greatest picnic he had been on. If that was not bizarre enough, what happened next could not be a stronger indicator of the attitudes of the time. Rather than toasting with the usual alcoholic beverage, milk was used. Why? It was noted that the wealth of the province was based on the dairy industry, and as such, it was extremely appropriate to use milk. The participants clearly chose to ignore the fact that this wealth was created on land that had been confiscated from its original Maori owners. This clearly demonstrates the enormous lack of sensitivity of the effects and legacy of the confiscations and what the consequences of this were for Maori. As the veterans died off, so did the formal commemorations until the centennials started occurring, and these provided an opportunity for some attempt to reframe the narrative. Among the leaders in this was the Reverend Mangatitoki Cameron of Waikato. When he gave an address during the Battle of Wairakere centennial commemorations in 1960, he asked the predominantly Pākehā audience to consider what you call the Maori Wars ought to be renamed the Pākehā Wars. By the same token, what you term rebels are our heroes. The murders, reprisal killing, the victory, our loss. While apparently well received on the day and published in full in both Taranaki papers, the address appears to have had little impact on the general populace when it came to providing a better awareness or understanding of the wars. Another rare sign of change occurred in 1958 when the Taranaki Regional Committee of the National Historic Places Trust organised for the word rebels to be removed from the monument at Te Manu on the basis that such terms were offensive and were not reflective of reality. However, largely the status quo remained. Earlier I asked the question, why do we not value our past? If we understand our past, where we've come from, then we are much better placed to deal with the present. Many of the contemporary issues that we face as a nation can be traced back to events such as the New Zealand Wars. If your rohe was invaded, the basis of your economy destroyed, and lands confiscated, you're not going to be very well equipped to deal with life. Also, if you're denied access to wahitapu, mahinga kai, or even the use of te reo Māori, your very well-being is going to be severely impacted upon and become an intergenerational issue. Recently, our Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, announced that the teaching of New Zealand history, including the New Zealand Wars, in our schools and kura in a coherent way will be expected from 2022. I believe that this is an important step forward and will go a long way in helping the nation to better understand, remember and deal with its fractured past. However, the devil will be in the detail. Whose history will be told? Will the teaching profession have the interest, skills and resources needed? And knowing the dates of battles is not enough. It is about putting events and their effects into a bigger context. Another extremely positive initiative is this annual gathering, Te Pūtake o Te Riri, He Rau Mau Mahara, where we can come together to commemorate and discuss the wars fought on our soil. Having a specific day to come together provides an opportunity to grow awareness and understanding of the wars, increasing our collective knowledge of how these conflicts have shaped and continue to shape this country. While the conversation may not always be comfortable, it is nevertheless crucial that we have it. Thousands turn out each Anzac Day to remember those that served in the overseas conflicts that New Zealand has been involved with. I would venture to say that the participants of these commemorations have a basic understanding of what happened in the various campaigns fought in those conflicts. That's a good thing. Sadly, the same cannot yet be said for the New Zealand Wars. This is our collective challenge to build knowledge and awareness of the conflicts fought in New Zealand during the 19th century. Let's collectively ensure that the momentum that has been started around acknowledging the New Zealand Wars continues. Let's make sure we work in true partnership, Māori and Pākehā, allowing the various worldviews and narratives to be respectfully heard and discussed. We are all, no doubt, acutely aware that the bulk of what has been written and published on this topic is through a Pākehā lens. It is now time to make sure the Māori accounts are heard. Let's truly value the war-related sites that are left, acknowledging the important part they have in this kaupapa. Look how other nations have treated similar sites, places like Gettysburg in the United States or Culloden in Scotland. In New Zealand, we have been slow to pick up on the opportunities these sites present. In 2016, the New Plymouth District Council purchased a block of land where Te Pohia Pā was built, and initial planning with iwi and hapu, New Plymouth District Council and other stakeholders is exploring how this site can perform a key educative role. There are similar opportunities for other Taranaki sites. Let's be vigilant in how we use language when talking about these events. Nearly 60 years ago, the Reverend Mangatitoki Cameron warned that terms such as Maori wars and rebels were loaded. Thankfully, they are now beginning to be heard less and less. But we still need to be mindful of the power of language and how it can skew our thinking. And finally, let's work together to make sure future generations of New Zealanders do not turn away from our history because it is too difficult to bear. I have been extremely impressed with how young people have shown leadership in this area and how they are ready to embrace new ways of thinking about our past. We must help pave the way for them so our fractured past and legacies of conflict can give way to a positive future. He waka e te noa. We are all in this together. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Oi, ko tēnā koe Kelvin. Nanaia e te whānau. We'd like to invite Honourable Minister Kelvin Davis to come forward now to kōrero, which after this whānau, just so you're aware, we will be launching the documentary called New Zealand Wars, Stories of Waitara. Ora mai Kelvin.
Tēnā tātou, me pehea rā te kai kōrero noa e whai muri I ngā tohunga kōrero pērā I a Ruakere I a Nanaia I a te rau ngā Kelvin. Nā reira aroha mai kaua koutou e wārea e te moi, noho tonu. It's wonderful to be here, and that kōhiri this morning I think is one for the ages. I hope it was captured on video in its entirety, and it has set a new benchmark. I hope though that the cameras weren't focused on Okuturi e Wiriwirianga. But it was a fantastic occasion, a fantastic event. In typical Ngāpuhi fashion, actually I was only told 5 minutes before this began that I was going to be speaking, so in typical Ngāpuhi fashion I'll make it about Ngāpuhi. I want to start with my great-great-great-great-grandmother, whose son was a man named Whetoi, and whose brother was a man named Whiria. And I'm just going to tie this ever so slightly into the 2-year 250 commemorations that are going on at the moment. Whiria must have met Cook and Tupaia, because in the conversation, in our whānau history, we know that Whiria had this conversation with a Tahitian, and he said, so, well, who's the rangatira in Tahiti? And the Tahitian replied, our king, his name is Pomare. And Whiria said, well, if the name of your king, if it's good enough for his name to be Pomare, I'll take that name. So this tupuna, Whiria, became Pomare. Now he met his Waterloo down on the banks of the Waipara River, at a place called Te Rore, and upon his death there, his sister's son Whetoi, who I mentioned earlier, took the name Pomare, Whetoi Pomare. Whetoi signed Te Whakaputanga and Te Treaty o Waitangi. Now Whetoi Pomare was the, at one time was the rangatira in Kororare. And in the 1830s there was a battle between the southern tribes of Mai Tupuna Whetoi Pomare and the northern tribes of the Bay of Islands. It was called the Girls' War. And some women from my hapu got into a fight on the shores of Russell there. They were fighting over a man, a ship captain. And of course the other side started it. Ngāti Manu wouldn't start a fight. But in the end, there was a massive battle called the Girls' War on the shores of Kororarika, where over 100 people lay dead. And just as a matter of interest, if you're standing at the Duke of Marlborough, as most people do when they go to Russell, on the right end of the beach, right down the far end, is where they washed the two papaku and cleaned them in the creek running there. If you go there now, that's where you'll back your boat into the water and park your boat trailer as you go off fishing. And the creek where those two papaku are washed is pretty much Parukatoa. So the northern tribes, when they actually came down to fight Ngāti Manu mai hapu, and we've got this habit, don't we, of elevating our tupuna. They were noble, courageous people, they could never do anything wrong. So I'll put it like this: my tupuna Whetoi Pomare made a strategic withdrawal in the best interest of our hapu. And he moved across the Bay of Islands to Moturangi, just off Paihia. And then he was there while he waited for his pa at Otuihu to be refurbished. And I'll come to Otuihu later on. But so my whānau was ensconced in Kororareka, which happens to be where on the March the 11th, 1845, the Battle of Kororareka kicked off. Now that was started because Hone Heke went up the Maiki hill to the flagstaff and took an axe to the flagstaff. That was the fourth time it was toppled. Two of the previous times he had also chopped it down. The first time he had promised the Governor Fitzroy, I think it was, that he wasn't going to take to the flagstaff, he wasn't going to chop it down as he threatened. Instead he got his mate Te Haratua to go and chop it down on his behalf. And I'll come back to Te Haratua soon. But people think, oh, you know, Hone Heke, he was a ratbag, and he was doing it basically for kicks. Well, the fact of the matter is, he chopped down that flagstaff out of utter frustration at the loss of his rangatiratanga, and he tried numerous times in many ways, from writing letters to the governor to asking for meetings. The governor totally avoided meeting up with him, and it was out of a pure act of frustration that he cut down their flagpole. And in his thoughts, he was probably thinking, look, that flagpole is just a tree, and it come off my land, I can do what I want with it. Obviously, the English thought took things differently. So Kororareka kicked off. The day of their pakanga, their sole objective was to chop down the flagpole, and it took 2 or 3 hours for that to happen. When you was chopping down that flagpole, there was a diversion to the other end of the town to draw troops away from there, and Pūmuka was the chief who was there, and Te Ruki Kawati, I think. Up on the hills behind Russell was my other hapu, Te Kapotai. They had another diversion. And when the flagstaff fell, they basically disappeared because their job had been done. By this stage, many of the settlers got on board the ship that was out in the harbour, and but basically hostilities ended. But the British, for some reason, decided to start lobbing cannonballs into Kororareka. I think there were a few people were looting, both Māori and Pākehā, my understanding, so they started to lob these cannonballs, and in one of the cannonballs, I believe, hit the arsenal. So there was an almighty explosion, and basically the town disappeared into smithereens. As a result, the English decided, well, we've got to go and teach these Māoris a lesson. Within a couple of days, maybe a week or so later, they went to that pā at Otuehu, where my tupuna whetoi Pomare by this time was set up. And the North Star, the ship, the North Star, stood off Otuehu pā. They called out to Pomare to come aboard. He refused. They said, well, if you don't come aboard, we're going to start lobbing cannonballs into your pā. So he did. And he was taken captive at that stage. He was taken captive because he said, no, I was neutral, I had nothing to do with what happened at Kororareka, and they basically said, well, you weren't neutral enough. You didn't prevent those events from happening, so that means you're with the people who did have that pakanga, or who did chop down the flagpole in there. So he was led off in chains. He was tied to the mast of the ship, North Star, and the North Star, we call it Te Nota, and that name runs through our whānau. My aunties, their names are Nota. He was chained to the mast, quite a degrading experience for Rangatira, and we have the name Here Here Tini, tied up in chains, run through our whānau name as well. So, and the reason I'm saying this is because we tend to think of there being just 3 main pakanga in the north, but there weren't. There were at least 8 or 9. Kororareka itself, Otuehu was the second one. From Otuehu, they went up to Puketutu. Puketutu is by Lake Omapere, and what saddens me every time I drove State Highway 1 is that you drive right over the top of this battlefield and nobody knows that it exists. It's just paddocks. And yet this was a major skirmish in the Northern Wars. Some people say it was a bit of an equal outcome. I think the British were highly surprised that they got such fierce resistance. On their way back to Waitangi to lick their wounds, they stopped off at a little sleepy village called Pūtake, just on the Waitangi River below Haruru Falls. And there, as you do when you're feeling a bit aggrieved at the loss of life of your mates, you go and slap around a few other innocent people, and so there was a battle there at Pūtake. Yesterday I was in Kerikeri. Tūhono Kerikeri is the event. It's 200 years since Hongi Hika invited Europeans to settle under his mantle at below Kororipo Pā in the town basin. I was talking to an archaeologist from Pūtake. Sorry, it's archaeologist anyway. Anyway, he said, oh yeah, there were a number of people killed, but there were at least 17 bodies of the British soldiers who were gathered up and buried where the town of Wakaiho now is. And he was saying, a couple of years later, they decided to disinter those bodies because they were buried in unconsecrated ground. So they disinter them and bury them in the town Urupa. So of the 17 soldiers, redcoats that were buried, 16 of them were dug up and reburied. I said, oh, what happened to the 17th? Why was he left there? He was a Negro. And the officer at the time said, oh no, we'll pick up the Pākehā soldiers and bury them, but the Negro guy can stay where he was. And sadly, where he's buried, in Wakaiho, he's buried under the service station, where you go and fill up your car, and your car, if it's anything like my old truck, leaks oil, and that's on this this soldier who just happened to be a Negro. But that was a sort of a sign of the racism of the time. So that was very interesting. They believe they know where he is now, and they go, like the exact spot, and there's going to be a disinterment at some stage next year, and he's going to be buried next to his comrades. Anyway, from Kaipātiki, the redcoats went back to Waitangi to lick their wounds, and then they went up to Ohaiwai. Ohaiwai was the pa of Penetaui, and it was one of the first examples of trench warfare. They just could not get in the redcoats. One day they had their flagpole up on a hill above the pa. They were lobbing bombs in, and it wasn't crumbling at all. One night, some of the locals in the pa snuck out, went up the hill, and tāhaid the flag. They then went back down into their pa. The next morning, when the sun came up, hello, there's their flag flying in the pa, and above it was a kakahu, a Māori cloak, a special cloak called the kahukairangi. This so enraged Colonel Despard, he said, we're charging that pa. There was a soldier by the name of Toby Philpott who said that is the most ridiculous thing he's ever heard in his life. He said, this is a disgrace to the uniform I'm wearing. I will not charge up and disgrace this uniform. So he stripped off and he charged in his undies, in his long johns. Toby Philpott was the only British soldier to get into that part, but he died inside. He was killed. He had his head chopped off and stuck on a pole, I think, as he sort of did in those days, I guess. But what happened was the defences of the pa were so strong. Our toa were in the trench, and just their heads were above the ground, and they put the rifles between the palisades of the pa. And the British charged, and they got within 10 yards of the pa, and then just boom. They just, really aimed fire, and I think about 70 fell in that one moment. All up there were about 130 casualties. Not all of them died. The British obviously stunned, withdrew. The people in the pa basically said, well, we've done our bit. Under the cover of darkness, they took off, withdrew and left. The next day, the British went up to gather their wounded and then they realised, hello, the pa's empty. They say that there was enough food in that pa, enough potatoes for 6 months. That's how organised they were in the pa. So the British hung around for a week or so, just sort of gathering themselves, and again, as you do when you're aggrieved that your mates have been killed and there's such a large-scale loss of life, they went back by way of Pakaraka to Paratua's pa. Paratua being the guy that Puneheki said, take my axe and go and chop down that flagpole for the first time, and they slapped his people around, and again there was another battle there at Haratua's Pa and Pakaraka. They then went back and licked their wounds again before heading up to Ruapekapeka. Now Ruapekapeka, I grew up literally about 8 miles away from Ruapekapeka. And do you think as a child I knew what happened there? Not a thing. It wasn't taught at our local school, and yet we are right there where Ruapekapeka happened. My tupuna Hikuwai Haruine, he fought there at Ruapekapeka. I did not know that. And it wasn't until you get older that you take an interest in things like this. We knew that there was this paddock up the road there with all these holes in the ground and trenches and that, but we didn't really know the full story. We knew there was a bit of a set to, but not the full story and the impact it had. So the point of this corridor really is to say that there weren't 3 main battles. There were actually a number of skirmishes, and I missed out one at Waikare. Waikare is my other hapu at Te Kapotai. The British went up there, paddled up the river. They were pretty disorganised. They wanted to make a dawn raid. The trouble is, in the estuary, there's all those tributaries, and they sort of getting their walkers stuck, and of course they were rowing backwards, of course, so they're in the dark. They couldn't really see what they were doing, and they startled some ducks, and the ducks took off in the air and alerted the people in the pa that there was trouble on the way. But still, a number of people at Waikare died in a skirmish. There was 8 or 9 of these battles in the north, and I raise it because I wanted to be remembered that in each of those skirmishes, battles, people died. Whether they're Māori or whether they were the British, people died. And for me, that's what Te Pūtake o Te Riri is about, remembering it all and telling our history, our whole history, not just bits and pieces, not just snippets, not just the most romantic parts of it, but warts and all. And this occasion is absolutely beautiful. I have one concern, and that is that this day, Te Pūtake o Te Riri, Te Rā Maumahara, becomes a Māori Day. Because I don't want to turn up in 20 years' time and it's just Māoris remembering it. I want all New Zealanders to be here. So wherever the next year's event is going to be held, I would love to see Pākehā encouraged to turn up and to hear these very stories, because it is about all of us as New Zealanders, not just our stories and us telling our own pain and our own mamai to ourselves, because we know it. Thank you very much, and bring along 3 friends next year. Rona, tēnā koutou te kura taumata o Pangaru, no roto Hokianga. Tēnā tātou katoa. I stepped to the side there. When we became government, I was the first minister to stand and give a mihi to the new parliament, and I in fact sang that very song. Unfortunately, my mother rang me the next day and said, son, next time you sing in front of a microphone, step away from it. The whole country will go, how tone deaf you are.
Apai, o tēnā koutou. Tapa nei whānau, we will have very soon the launch of New Zealand Wars, stories of Waitara by our radio New Zealand whānau, who are here ready to go. Just a few primary, you'll notice around all way, you'll see the placards just over here that have the program on it. So just in case you weren't aware, Hakari's around 4:30. At 6:30 we will be heading into, or 6:15, heading into Te Karoa Maui, where we will be getting set up for our live stream of our presenters and kōrero tonight. So you must be aware that there are limited numbers in Te Karoa, and viewing from will also be in here, the marquee, and we'll be ready to go at about 6:15. So what I'd like to do now is to call on our Radio New Zealand whānau. Jim, ahara mai, Mahanga, e na pēo koutou mā, mihi ngā rangi, ahara mai koutou. So we're just setting up now whānau for the launch of the documentary New Zealand Wars, Waitara Stories.
Koira, te tangata tutu taua. Ka re koa ko hau ko ni o ki ho ko Ruakere. Ko manu ko weka ko tōrua ko rua I hona ko te tahingo te rā. Tēnei te maro ka hurua, hurihuri nui no manu no weka. Ka tū tapuri atu, ka tū tapure mai. Weronoa ngā rākau whakaia. Ngā tupu nei I te kina mai rā wāhi. He ho mai mo taku waka mo wai mihia. Te mate o ngā rākau atu ka rere, te mate o ngā rākau atu ka niwha. Te mate o ngā rākau atu kai taua. Whano, ara mai te toki, haumi e, hui e. Taranaki maunga, tēnā koe, te Atiawa, te Taranaki tangata, tēnā koutou, e kui mā, e koro mā, e raurangi tira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Firstly, as an uri of Ngātiawa, I'm humbled to be here today to recognise the strong tribal connections with Taranaki. Our tupuna have sailed the vast expanse of the Pacific together. We have fought together, we have rebuilt together, and no doubt we as uri will prosper together. As chairman of Te Reo Irirangi o Aotearoa, Radio New Zealand, it is a humbling experience to have this opportunity to attend these commemorations, to personally acknowledge those of Te Atiawa and Taranaki who had trusted their precious stories with us. We and the rest of Aotearoa will be eternally grateful to you all. New Zealand Wars, Stories of Waitara is the second instalment of what we expect to be a growing anthology of stories about the history of our nation Aotearoa, New Zealand. The first instalment, New Zealand Wars, Stories of Ruakere, was judged the best documentary and best Māori program at the Television Awards in 2018. However, receiving critical acclaim and awards for us is not the goal. It is the hope of RNZ that by providing the opportunity for iwi Māori to share your tribal experiences, express what has been endured, greater understanding of past injustices and pain will make our nation stronger. To that end, I wish to acknowledge our Prime Minister and her commitment to change the education curriculum to ensure New Zealand history is taught in all of our country's schools by 2021. This significant change will ensure key aspects of our shared history, such as stories of Waitara, will be taught to future generations of New Zealanders so that they understand how those critical events influenced and shaped our nation and will help form a stronger sense of unified identity. We believe that New Zealand Wars series and stories of Waitara are taonga and legacy projects that will be viewed for many years and should be crucial components of the new direction of education in Aotearoa New Zealand. We also acknowledge that stories of Waitara are your stories, and it was important to us that you are all the first to see this documentary before it is released online at rnz.co.nz at 5 p.m. today. This is the worldwide premiere of Stories of Waitara.
Kia ora.
After the initial release, a wealth of additional material, such as extended interviews, will also be made available online. At Radio New Zealand, we are also changing, and we are committed to ensuring we fulfil our treaty partnership responsibilities. We want to tell more stories from a Māori perspective, made and delivered by Māori. To that end, I need to acknowledge the production team, producer-director, Mahanga Pihama, series creator and presenter, Mihi Ngarangi Forbes, executive producer, the extremely talented Annabelle Lee Mather, and all of the production support crew. I also acknowledge members of the RNZ whānau, our Chief Executive Paul Thompson, Kura Houtu, Māori, Shannon O'Nui Thompson, who is in the audience here today, and our Head of Commissioning, Kay Elmers, and all others from RNZ that have been involved in this important undertaking. Finally, it's important that I acknowledge the support of New Zealand On Air, who have been a committed partner for our joint RNZ New Zealand On Air Innovation Fund to tell these important narratives, but to also ensure we go on telling them into the future. To all uri of Taranaki, it is our hope that stories of Waitara resonates deep within your hearts and tells your stories and those of your tupuna in a way that gives us all a greater sense of appreciation. Leo tira ki tēnei whakatauki no Taranaki, kaore he pau I ika unahi nui. Taranaki cannot be conquered. They are like a fish with great thick scales. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa.
Manu korihi, te atia wa tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou te whānau whānui, ka mutu tātou katoa, nā te karanga, nā te kaupapa tātou I karanga. Nā te kaupapa o te Pūtake o te Riri tātou I karanga I tēnei ahi tēnei ata. Me te mōhua he nui tonu ngā mahi kei mua I te arua. Tēnei kāmihi, tēnei kāmihi, tēnei kāmihi. I mua I te putanga, I mua I te whakapāhotanga o tēnei o ngā pakipumeka e tika ana. Kia mihia, koutou, ngā tāngata I whai wā I roto I tēnei o ngā pakipumeka me te mōhio mō koutou tēnei taonga. No koutou tēnei taonga, ko tā mātau, he whakarongo noa ki ngā kōrero, me te tāpiri e tahi hopukanga, kia noho mana tonu o koutou kōrero. Kei te iwi, ko te reo whakamihi tēnei o te ngākau, e mihi nei, e mihi nei, e mihi nei. Ruakere, whareoka, ka mutu koutou te tira I whai wāhi, mai te tīmata ngā moroki nei. E kore raua te puna mihi e mimiti. Tino kore rawa. Ngā kōrero katoa I whakatakuto hia I roto I te poho o tō tātou whare. E tika ana kia pāhotia e ngā kōrero. E tika ana kia rangona ki ngā taringa o tēnā, horapa I te motu. He hai, he taonga e nei kōrero. He taonga e nei kōrero. Ngā āhuatanga katoa I
tikāna kia kitea, kia korea I e me meha, kia korea I e me meha. Te atiawa, waitara mihi ana kia koutou. Tērā te kōrero e meana, e korea muri e hokia. Engari tēnei wā kāre au e tautoko I tēnā kōrero. Mā muri e whakamahara I a tātou I ngā mahi, kōti kē te mahi. Mā muri e whakamahara I a tātou, ngā kare aroto, I pēhea ngā kare aroto. O tātou tūpuna, hei whakamatara I a tātou katoa, I tēnei wā tonu. Tēnei o ngā taonga, tēnei o ngā whakipūmeka, e tikāna kia whakahokia mai ki tōna Pūtake. Ki konei, whakapāhoti atu kia koutou. Ki konei, āminetia, kore āminetia rānei e te iwi, me te mōhio, no koutou tēnei taonga. Koe anō rā tēnei, he mihinoa, he mihinoa, he mihinoa. Ngā tāngata katoa, I uiuia mo tēnei o ngā whakipūmeka. Ko koe tēnā ruakere koutou, ko ngā mata, ko kura, ko hēmi, ko rāwiri, koutou katoa. E kore rawa te punamihi e miniti. Tēnā koutou, a Pūtake, tēnā tātou katoa. Kapai, koe anō rā, ka mutu tā mātou waiata, ka tukuna te wā ki te tangata e nohoana ki tērā o ngā whare, te tūmanako, he matara tērā tangata, māna te pātene e pēhi, kia pai ai tā tātou mātaki I te whakipūmeka. E mihi ana tēnā koutou, kātiake tēnā tātou.
Kia ora.
Maire no mātou, ka nui te aroha. Ka nui te aroha o tēnei hunga ki te kaupapa. Ka nui te whakapono ki tēnei kaupapa I runga anō I te rangi maari e tēnā koutou a kātiake, tēnā tātou.
In the epic struggle for control of Taranaki, Waitara was the flashpoint. Waitara was the prize. Settlers wanted it as much as Māori were determined to keep it. In 1860, Waitara was the spark that ignited conflict that raged through the entire province for the next 20 years. For Māori, it ended much as it began, with the ransacking of their lands and mana, the bitter cost of daring to defend themselves against what essentially was a home invasion. The last line of defence for Te Atiawa was here. Behind the palisades and fortifications of Pukerangi-ora. It remains a lasting, if largely forgotten, symbol of Māori resistance and resilience. Kia ora, I'm Mahingarangi Forbes. Join us for Stories of Waitara. The story begins here, at Manuapo, South Taranaki, 1854. Hundreds of Te Atiawa and other iwi gather for an extraordinary meeting of chiefs.
They met to talk about the impact of colonisation in this region. They understood that the selling of land for what the government was offering was not worth pursuing. They understood that the value of the land was far better if they retained land and developed it economically. And in that hui, they made the commitment not to sell land. In the hui, they passed around a toki, the name of the toki, O Kurukuru, and as arrived in each person's hands, they uttered these words, the oath, tangata tōmua, whenua tōmuri. People would give their lives before they gave their lands to sale. Leaders from throughout Taranaki came together in that hui. That included Te Rangitake. Te Rangitake was a leader focused in on peace. He was a diplomat. He was someone who sought to build relationships. Rere tā whangawhanga, his father said, kia kaue tuku a waitara kia makere atu I te kapu o tō ringa. And Te Rangitake was the person for that. And of course, Te Matakatea, the most recognised military leader within Taranaki of his time. He had honed skills of strategy and warfare all through the previous musket wars, and he shared those skills with others such as Hapurona. Hapurona, as a young man, fought alongside Te Matakatea. He had fought within many of the key battles with Waikato and other tribes from the north. He was the person that gave confidence to his people, knowing that they would be led into war. Ko te mate o te whenua, ko te mate o te tangata. That is the type of leader you need when you go to war.
And so our people said, e kore mātou e tuku I te whenua, ki te hoko. Hei nohoanga mō te Pākehā. Whakatūria ngā pau. Ko kurukuru ki runga, ko taipake ki raro. Ka tikina e Te Atiawa, ka whakatūria tōna pau ko waitaha. Ka herea te whenua, ka herea te tangata. Ka whakairia te henu tapu ki runga ki ngā whata. He pata ua no te rangi ka oti te hiri ki te whenua. He paua auahi no te whenua ka oti te hiri ki te rangi. So these proclamations and statements and policies were sanctified by clear oaths and agreed to by all those present at Manuapo.
Well, for many Pākehā, the Manuapo hui is seen as the start of a land league, and it's seen as a threat to this desire to acquire further lands.
Nearby, in the settlement of New Plymouth, the decisions made at Manuapo have a profound impact. No more Māori land for sale meant settlers were largely confined to the town limits, and they were furious.
Pākehā didn't travel halfway around the world to play second fiddle to people that they regarded as inferior to themselves. And so New Plymouth, it's a settlement that's frustrated by the fact that they deem that they don't have enough land to farm. And there is this intense pressure that builds up through the 1850s as a result of that. And so Waitara is seen as an ideal place to acquire further lands.
The land within Taranaki is extremely fertile. Ki ana he whenua mōmona, rich volcanic soils, Most things will flourish within these conditions. Gardening was one of the main activities of Taranaki through that period. They developed economic base by selling the kai that they produced, and Pākehā coming into the regions could look upon the soil and quickly realise the fertility of this region. They planted kumara, taiwa, pumpkins, and wheat. And they traded those crops with the settlement in New Plymouth. Not far away, the Pākehā were looking towards the land that was accessible to Māori and the developments that were taking place, and the tension rose. They cultivated in an area, a river delta, at the mouth of Waitara River, which was their main expressway heading inland. They could carry their kai on waka right up the river.
The Waitara dispute is really about two different understandings of how Māori and Pākehā should live together. On the one hand, the Crown is in charge, and by implication settlers are as well, and that conforms with their notions that they are superior to Māori, because that's what a lot of Pākehā firmly believe. But that doesn't accord with the reality on the ground, where Māori are still incredibly powerful and in many ways dominating the economy and in charge of their own affairs.
Waitara doesn't have the significance it once had. But by the late 1850s, settlers would stop at nothing to get it. Waitara was prime real estate. So Crown land agents set about manipulating a sale from a local chief, Te Teira Manuka. It was classic divide and rule.
And it's hard because I don't want to villainise Te Teira. He has that position within our history where it's easy to say, nā te he. It's not a nice thing for everyone to drag their tupuna's name up every time. The real culprits were the Crown. Their sole job was to separate the people from their land. Crown agents like McLean, they glorified real estate agents, were running around looking to buy land off whoever would sell it.
Donald McLean came from quite a modest background in the Scottish Highlands, and the clan system that was not dissimilar from Māori, was fluent in Māori and had, I think, quite a in-depth understanding of Māori society, knew many of the rangatira, had close relationships with them. But he was also the leading figure in terms of Crown purchasing, so he, in a way, he kind of exploited the knowledge that he had of Māori in order to further the Crown's ends. McLean is instrumental in advising Governor Gore Brown that Te Tere has a right to sell those lands.
And he would have known the consequences of that purchase.
He knew that I think that there was going to be some kind of impending showdown as a result of that, because previously it wasn't the usual practice to purchase lands from individuals, especially when the rest of the owners disputed that. And so the notion that Te Tere could sell those lands on his own without the consent of the leading rangatira of the community and the rest of the people of Waitara was something new and shocking for Māori. February 1860, the British attempt to survey the disputed lands, and the owners send out kuia to pull out the survey pegs, which is seen as a way of signalling opposition to the supposed purchase without doing that in a confrontational way. And the Crown's response to that really is quite extraordinary, because they call this an act of rebellion, pulling out survey pegs from the ground, and they declare martial law over the Taranaki province.
It having become necessary to issue the Governor's proclamation, placing the district under martial law, I deem it advisable, in order to prevent unnecessary alarm among the settlers, to assure them that should events lead to actual collision with the natives, due notice will be given to enable them to provide for the safety of their families. G.F. Murray, Lieutenant Colonel.
They could see that one of the first things that the government did when they purchased land was to survey. And the surveyors came in and laid pegs down to divide the land, to determine what was Pākehā land and what was Māori.
Part of the rules of those days is that you couldn't buy disputed land. One of the rules was that only the Queen could buy land off our rangatira. In that case for Waitara, we were made absolutely sure that people knew that this was a disputed land. Right from the time of the surveyors coming to pick it up to our old people going out and pulling out those survey pegs to show their opposition to it.
We have a story about one of our kuia keita, who was one of the first to start pulling up pegs to demonstrate to the government that this is Māori land, kei a tātou te rangatiratanga o tēnei whenua. And Keita pulled those pegs as what was perhaps the first act of resistance in this way, protest against the acquisition of land, the forced acquisition of lands within Taranaki. For our kuia keita to have done this on these lands is both symbolic and also an act of great courage, knowing soldiers and the surveyors were there, but she stood and pulled the pegs out in plain sight to demonstrate to them that she did not recognise the act of surveying land and they did not recognise the purchase of this land.
With martial law in place, hostilities were now inevitable. Veteran warrior chief Hapurona emerges as the military leader and tactician. The man and the hour have met.
Hapurona had a different experience in war. Hapurona had been up in the far north, and so that experience in fighting the Pākehā came to the fore as a person we needed when we were invaded by the British Army.
A large gathering was called in New Plymouth by the government. A large feast was held for all of those who attended. It was attended by people such as Te Teira, Te Rangitake and Hapurona and many, many others. And it was there the karaki that Hapurona composed, advocating peace, ko te karaki o te maungarongo, coming from a person who was recognised for his skill, his strategy in war. His words meant something when he was the one advocating that Taranaki did not want war, it wanted peace.
Ka mate hiro e Pūtake ke tāni te tumutei nei tō tua tāni te taurike tei nei tō tua. Ko e tai a mingi mingi ko e tuki a ko e wakaka. Kei runga nei tētei pō, kei raro nei tētei pō. Pō ki tupua tētei pō, pō ki tawito tētei pō. Ura mā nea nea kataka te pō, hia kataka te pō.
Hapurona said, I've seen war, I've seen what war gives the people, and we do not want this for Te Atiawa. We do not want this for Taranaki, and what starts in Waitara will very quickly escalate to the whole country.
He matua o ki te wānanga, he matua o ki arangi nui e tūnei. Kei piri, kei tata mai o ki kia au e tūnei. E rongo e o kairi ake ki runga, tūturu waka maua kia tina, tina ui e, tāe ki e.
But the crown was not for turning. The British set up a garrison in Waitara, and in response, Hapurona hastily builds a fortified pā at Te Kōhia, overlooking the garrison's main route back to New Plymouth. And today, there's nothing here. Nothing at all, not even a signpost to mark this place, Te Kōhia Pā, as one of the most significant sites in New Zealand's history.
For us in Taranaki, the 17th of March in 1860 was the most important date That was the date where the first shots were fired upon Te Kohia Pā.
Te Kohia was a statement. Te Kohia was a statement by our people in clear view of the Crown's military camp that this is our whenua. You can't just come here and say that we've surveyed it, therefore we've bought it, therefore it's ours. There wasn't a major battle there, as much as it was the major signal that the Crown had started hostilities against us without provocation.
From a Māori perspective, that was all important. If Māori had launched the first attack, well, then we would have been in the wrong. However, the Crown had done that. That demonstrated that they were the aggressor.
Following on from that, it was considered that the Te Atiawa cause was a just one and that others would then come to their assistance and aid them. Almost immediately, there are calls from Waikato and so on.
It was attacked by the Crown, thinking that this is where Te Atiawa was going to hold their ground and to take a stand. But when they attacked, there was no one in there. The people within it had all left.
The assumption on the Crown side was that there would be a quick, easy victory. And this is the source of immense frustration. And these assumptions of an easy victory, they don't bear fruit.
We have a kōrero about a young kōtiro. Ka koa te tamahine whakaaria te Iringaniu. She was sent to climb to the top of Te Iringaniu, the tallest peak within the Kaitake Ranges, to send a message to the iwi of Taranaki to the south, that the war within Waitara had begun.
This waiata e koripauri tonu, that's a Waitara waiata. In a couple of the lines it reflects on the young girl. They sent this young girl because they knew that if any of the soldiers or the military saw a young girl running, they wouldn't take any notice of her, rather than if it was a young boy running, it would be more suspect. So they do this so that she could successfully get there to warn Taranaki people that Waitara were in war. She goes up to Te Iringaniu and she lights fire. And it's the smoke signals that let Taranaki people know that there's a cry of need on this side.
By now, New Plymouth is really spooked. And so are the troops here at the Omata Stockade, a fort just a few k's south of the colonial settlement. And that's because a little further down the coast at Kaipopo Pā, Waireka, Te Atiawa and southern tribes were gathering, determined to uphold the oath they'd made at Manuapo, no more land sales. The stockade is vulnerable, so just 11 days after the Battle of Te Kohia, British regulars and militia march on Kaipopo. But this time, Māori choose to stand and fight.
Within the pā was Te Matakatea, Matakatea led the group in the front of the pā and sent his men to the back of the pā, knowing that if they would be attacked, it would most likely be from that location. As they were being attacked from the rear, confusion started to grow. And from what I was told, Te Matakatea stood and called the people to hold the ground, to hold the pā, and not give in. But it was in that battle that many of the main leaders from Taranaki iwi were killed, with Te Matakatea and others managing to escape.
There are mixed accounts of what happened next, but what we do know is that Kaipopo was ultimately overwhelmed by imperial troops.
For Taranaki iwi, and actually for Ngāti Ruanui as well, it was devastating. Devastating because one of the ariki of the tribe for Taranaki iwi, Paora Kukutai, perished there. He was shot. And there were a lot of others that were killed, and there are accounts where they were carrying people back in stretchers from here, further south, back into their rohe.
And did the attacks continue?
Absolutely. So the Navy under Captain Craycroft shifted out of Waireka and Kaipopo and then came back into town here. They all loaded up on the government steamer and they continued down the coast and bombed the people as they were carrying their wounded back home.
So, this one, Hugh Harris, was cruelly murdered by the rebel Māori at Waitara.
Yeah, it's remarkably strong language, isn't it? Which kind of speaks to a mindset that all of these references to rebel Māori, to murder and so on, there's kind of this idea that it was the Crown fighting a just war rather than Māori.
And I guess if you didn't have the full story, and this is the only narrative that you stroll past, you know, you would be forgiven for thinking that it was a one-sided war.
Yeah, that's right.
After Waireka, a ceasefire is ordered, and it lasts almost 3 months. But Te Atiawa General Hapurona immediately starts building a twin pā stronghold at Puketakaoere, close to where the war began.
Again, we see the approach used by Hapurona when he established two pā. Puketakaoere, that was standing off to the side, and then another one in the more traditional sense of a pā at Onuku Kaitara.
The twin pā are a deception. Yes, they're manned, but they're largely decoys. The real strength lies outside the palisades.
And so again, the strategy played out as Hapurona had planned. We see the approach used by Hapurona putting his enemy in a position of weakness, attacking the traditional pā, and all of the time having his forces hidden in a position of strength.
As one British officer remarked, the pā looked innocent enough from the outside. Theirs for the taking. So 350 men were primed and readied to teach the natives a lesson they'd never forget.
It was a masterful plan. The veteran fighting chief Hapurona had fortified both pā, Puketakaoere and Onuku Kaitara, and he'd anticipated the troops would attack from the garrison over there in Waitara, and sure enough, they did. But what they didn't expect was this. The bulk of Hapurona's men weren't in the pā, they were hidden in rifle pits like this in between the two. The trap was set.
After an artillery bombardment comes a full frontal British assault. Army and Navy vying to take the pa first, but little do they know what's in store. Hapurona's elaborate network of defences has been completely overlooked by their officers. Charging into the open, they're caught in a withering crossfire. They don't know what's hit them.
The British were kind of lulled into a trap, really, and it's really disastrous for the British, and it is seen as a major defeat. The British suffer their heaviest defeat of the war. Nearly 1/5 of their number end up as casualties, I think 30 killed and 34 wounded. So it's really quite a humiliating blow.
The assault ends in complete disarray. In the bush and in the swamp, fleeing soldiers make for easy targets. An unthinkable setback for imperial prestige. But for Māori, it's payback. Utu for Waireka. Today there's not much to show for the dramatic events that unfolded here. Onuku Kaitara is on private land, a paddock for cows. Back then, these gullies were the only paths of retreat to nearby Camp Waitara. But they were also treacherous swamps. And if the fleeing troops thought they'd experience the worst of it, they were badly mistaken.
Before these two pa was a whole network of repo, of swamps and streams. And this being the middle of June meant that it was extremely cold, the middle of winter. And we understand that the soldiers that were attacking these pa suffered hypothermia because of the cold.
Trapped and disoriented, the survivors were picked off by an ever-present enemy. Some drown, overwhelmed by sheer exhaustion. There are accounts of Hapurona himself challenging a British officer to the death. Sword versus Taiaha. The Taiaha won.
It's said that a number of the bodies of those who were killed lay in that swamp for weeks afterwards. And this is also seen as a source of humiliation, that even those who are killed are not retrieved and given decent burial.
News of the defeat sends shockwaves through the settler community.
At the end of June 1860, there's kind of panic in the settlement of New Plymouth, and there is this decision made to evacuate the women and children because it's no longer considered safe. A lot of them go to Nelson. Within New Plymouth itself, you know, the conditions there become pretty appalling too over time, and you get, over the space of a year, about 120 people die of disease and illness and so on because of the cramped conditions there.
On the upper reaches of the Waitara River, Te Atiawa have dug in at Pukerangiora.
The tactics that our people had back then when fighting against larger numbers and more guns was to make a stand, let the opposition expend their energy and then tactically withdraw to the next place. And so our people were constantly preparing the next place to withdraw to.
It's their last desperate line of defence, a last-ditch all-in effort to push back the invaders. Shooting pits, tunnels, bunkers, palisades.
This was a significant pā. It was a place where the people of Te Aotearoa had defended themselves on many occasions in the past.
But by December 1860, the British make a crucial change of tactics that literally alters the landscape and shifts the balance of power.
3.5 kilometres of saps were built by the troops to get close enough to the pā to make their attack.
This is such a fundamental shift in warfare for the British. Up until this point, they'd used full frontal assaults on pā. Now their engineers were constructing deep covered trenches or saps to protect their advancing soldiers.
There's a huge number of people involved, and the sapping operation is quite a sophisticated one, but it's a very, very slow one. And for people wanting quick progress, they can't see it here. They want to see a major defeat inflicted on Māori, but it doesn't happen. The sapping operation begins in December 1860, and it's still going in March 1861. So months and months of sapping.
In all, a force of 1,000 men and some 1,500 metres of trench lines. It's the most ambitious military engineering project in the colony to date. The saps, much of them covered for protection, are reinforced with earth-filled manuka baskets called gabions. Not only is it back-breaking work inching their way forward, but the engineers can barely raise their heads without being targeted by an unexpected and deadly foe.
E tū tama wahine te wā o te kore. This was a statement made in Pariaka, and we see the same activity there at Pukerangiora in that battle against the troops of the Crown. They held the role just as much as men in defending Te Aotearoa against the onslaught of the troops. Holding positions, picking off the soldiers one by one. Similarly, using strategy to maintain a position of strength within their pā. Ka mihi ki o tātou wahine. Tō rātou maia, tō rātou manoa nui. Such strength, such character, such courage.
But after months of bombardment, skirmishes and bloodshed, and in the face of such overwhelming odds, the Te Aotearoa defenders are left with no real choice. Rather than fight to the last, they abandon Pukerangiora and melt into the bush. Their allies head home. By March 1861, a shaky ceasefire is in effect. But after a year of fighting, there's no real military conclusion. And this is just the start. In the years to come, there'll be more battles. But as for this first Taranaki war, the cost is enormous. The countryside is devastated, the economy in ruins.
What is it like for someone from Waitara to live in a community where you're reminded constantly by the street names and the blocks of lands of those men who took your land?
It's not so much the signs on the streets, but the hardest thing is to see rangatira whānau of Waitara still living hard, still not being able to produce their own goods, still not being able to support their own families. It's sad to see an education system that still denies them that knowledge. It's sad to see a judicial system which provides justice to everyone except our own. So the street signs, well, that will remind us who the bad guys are.
"160 years on from what began at Waitara, so much of Taranaki's past remains unresolved. And here in the church grounds of Old St Mary's, New Plymouth, the bitter legacy still echoes across the divide."
Well, this is quite a contrast. A single headstone on the furthest corner of the church grounds.
Yeah, you couldn't get any further away really, and this is where a number of rangatira are buried, and it was considered too offensive to bury them with the British and Crown soldiers in the cemetery, so they're in the grounds of the vicarage, as you say, the furthest corner of the church property.
I think if I was a descendant of Te Atiawa or a descendant of Wetini Taiporutu, I would feel like my rangatira, my ancestors, hadn't been respected.
Tau mai ki roto pukerangi ora I te rangi nei me te māturu mai o te ua. Ka tika hoki ki a ua ki runga I a tātou I tēnei rā. Ko rongo tēnei, wa piri mai ki runga ki tēnei wenua. Ka ki atu he pata ua ki te rangi ka oti te hiri ki te wenua, he pawa ua ki runga I te wenua ka oti te hiri ki te rangi. Tea I o te wenua, tēnā he pakanga ki te ua o te rangi. Ana, kei konei tātou I roto I te ua he tohu o te ora.
Walking these forgotten trenches from a largely forgotten war and remembering the stories. The weight of loss is still heavy in the air. Lands lost through confiscation, lost culture, lost identity. For Te Atiawa, there can be no forgetting, but also there's a determination not to be victim to the past.
You can look back at history and say, our tupuna went through all of these conflicts and we're in a better space now. But when you look back at the conflict and say those were never resolved, we are still in a position of being demeaned and being belittled in our own area. Our tupuna constantly said the way forward was peace. The way forward for us is to focus on that legacy that they spoke about, that vision that they focused in. Because if we focus in on the grief and the pain, we constantly pull ourselves back into that grief.
You just like going up there and listening to the water running down in Rawa, looking over the cliff, imagining the whare, te waha o te marangai that used to once stand there, and all the tupuna. And I also think of tamariki, laughter, happy times. And I do recall one time I went up there with my two little moko with me. My moko were running along the top of the trenches and they were both calling and laughing. One of the wahine called out to me and she said, "Wahine, o mokopuna." And I'm looking at my babies running and they were just so happy. And I went, "Kei te pai wei ho rāua, kei te kāinga rāua." So it just made me think like that somber feeling wasn't going to affect my babies.
Today, the great fighting pā at Pukerangiora rests, wreathed in kawakawa.
Kia kā no te tupu o te kawakawa I konei, he tohu ki te mate, engari e aro ana ki te apōpōtanga, e hoki mai te ora ki runga Pukerangiora, ki runga Te Atiawa, ki runga I a Taranaki puta atu ki te ao. The grief of Waitara will not be forgotten. It reminds us of the aspirations our tupuna held for the future.
Puke puke rangi kia ora atita witi witi nui te tangi a te tirai raka naura e raka te kata waka motunga e karere mai koe e wai karu karu nei e riringi Waitara I wai puke puke e keia tata nei te pauri e mautaratara kei ngā wetu o te rangi te ngahau o te poe.
He pūtea tautoko tēnei hōtaka, nā te pūtea auaha o te reo irirangi o Aotearoa me te irirangi te motu.
Manu kore I pā, ko e nei o ngā te muru me te raupatu. O tātou nei, no reira I runga I tērā, kei te mea atu ki a koutou, whakatū tēnei mō ngā mokopuna, ngā tātara ki I, o tātou nei ati awa, manu kore I, e tū nei, no reira tēnei te mea atu ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. What a privilege, whānau. You're the first, we're the first to see our story. We're the first to have an opportunity now to share our story, and to all our whānau who had a part to play in this, mihi atu ki a koutou hoki. E kawe nei koe nei ngā kōrero o ngā mātua tupuna. To all our whānau here te Atiawa Taranaki that participated in the kōrero, that shared the stories of mihi atu ki a koutou. So here whānau, here at Orway, here at Manukorihi Pā, to now have this kōrero that will go live at 5 o'clock. Can't be too far away now. And to have us here, our whānau, to be able to tell the story, and the support from our Radio New Zealand whānau mihi atu kia koutou. Anō reira, I runga I tērā, kei te huria nai nei ki ngā pānui, ngā pānui mo tēnei rā, me ngā pānui mo te apōpō. So firstly, whānau, you'll notice the core flute boards that have the program around, to let you know what's happening. We're not far off having our Hakari Kai. So Hakari Kai is going to be next on our agenda. After Hakari Kai, then we will be preparing ourselves for tonight's live feed with our speakers on the panel discussion that will be going live on Māori television. So 6:15 is when we will be in Te Ikaroa with limited numbers. So just a reminder, there's only these limited numbers in Te Ikaroa, and the rest of the viewing will be from here or outside. We also have tomorrow's proceedings. So for whānau who will be here tomorrow, you will see on the program that buses will be leaving here at 5 o'clock in the morning. And the buses are numbered. So all our buses are numbered, and each of the buses, so I'm just going to go through the numbers, and we're just going to keep reminding ourselves the numbers and who goes on what bus. But for our kaumātua and kuia, so this is for 5 o'clock in the morning, we have buses number 1, 3 and 5. The rest of the buses are for the general public and whānau to head over to Te Kōhia. Te Kōhia is on the main road, so we just got to be aware of that. We've got parking and everything all organised for tomorrow. We just got to be aware that there will be car parks up there, but if you're able to catch the bus, that would be great. After that, we will be heading back here for Parakuihi at 8 o'clock, and then we go into, dawn ceremony at 5:30 at Te Kōhia, then Waitara Cenotaph, 7 a.m. Down by the War Memorial in town here, with Parakuihi at 8 o'clock here at Orway. So we'll talk about the buses a bit later on and all that other organisation, but kua mutu tēnei wahanga. This part of our presentation and kōrero is now all complete, and we will await the call of rongo, karanga o rongo, ready for kai hakari. Nō reira, I runga I tērā kei te mii atu ki a koutou e kui mā kuru mā. Whai wā nai nei ki te kōrero ki tō hoa, pāna ki tēnei te kōrero o Waitara. Nō reira, I runga I tērā, ka tahi anō, ka huri ki ngā kuia, poi manu o te waiata. Kai au koutou.
Te Korimako o Taranaki.